Please welcome a panel of distinguished speakers to discuss the potential opportunities. The moderator is Anisha Rihanna, COO of Engine Starter and AI Foundation, and the panelists, Prakash Sumosutan, CEO and co-founder of Engine Starter and AI Foundation, Charinda Abekun, Managing Partner of N Ventures Private Limited, Arjun Vasing, Partner and Global Co-Head of FinTech, Other D. Little, and Dr. Basu Jarinvana, Chairman and CINO, Agri-App Technologies. Welcome.
我们接下来的小组讨论将会探讨 Web3 和可持续性对南亚、中东和北非地区带来了什么，以及这些地区的前景如何。请欢迎这一组杰出的发言人讨论潜在的发展机会。欢迎主持人 Anisha Rihanna、Engine Starter 和 AYA 基金会首席运营官，以及圆桌讨论成员 Prakash Somosandram、Engine Starter 和 AYA 基金会首席执行官兼联合创始人 Charinda Abekun、N Ventures Private Limited 董事总经理 Arjun Vasing、Arthur D. Little 合伙人兼全球金融科技主管 Dr. Basu Jarinvana Agri-App Technology 主席兼首席创新官。欢迎大家。
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Ding. Thank you, Prof. It was a long wait. Thank you so much for being here, panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Together with you, let me once again welcome our panelists for this extraordinary discussion, South Asia and MENA perspective. We're going to have a very dynamic and engaging conversation because I've prepped them well in advance. So first of all, a huge shout out to SUSS NIFT. This is personally a homecoming for me because I was part of the Genesis batch of students that graduated from the FinTech DeFi program here. At that time, no textbooks, not enough lecturers. Dr. Ding would say we all learned together, so we were now flipping our articles and ICOs, and that's how we have learned. All because of Professor Lee. He had that vision. He seeded that thought that FinTech is the future. Technology needs to be integrated into finance. And we all rolled up our sleeves and learned by trial and error. And surprisingly, it became an intuitive way of I conducted myself at work as well, because that's what this industry is about. And it brought me to South Asia and the region. And I met all of you working with Prakash as well. And fundamentally, it's to heal society, to use technology, how to achieve the true meaning of financial inclusivity. So without further ado, let me welcome our panelists and who didn't say, let's look at it later. Let's take it forward when the market is catching up, when the market picks up demand. They were the first movers who said, okay, let's do this. So this is a very raw, authentic conversation from the heart. And probably we've done introductions, a lot of shout out on LinkedIn. Maybe your introduction can be a little bit different. Arjun, welcome back to Singapore after 3 years. And maybe I'd like to ask you a question a little bit before we talk about Web3 and sustainability. 3 years later, what food are you most looking forward to eating here in Singapore, your favorite Singaporean food?
There we go. So hi. I wish I could pick one. I love the food in Singapore. Actually, I love being back in Singapore. I used to spend a week every month for about 4.5, 5 years of my life. So I'm sorry, I just can't answer that question because last night I arrived and the first thing I did was I went out for some food. And half the time I don't even pay attention because all of it tastes good.
Thank you. So later on, we're going to talk about all these gold digging you have done. You run this really celebrated podcast called Couchnomics with Arjun. I've gone on a binge listening. There's so much of knowledge that we've gathered. I'm going to ask you about that particular repeated word, dry powder, in the MENA region. What's buzzing, what's real? May I also welcome Dr. Basu. Dr. Basu is a visionary. He's a farmer first, then a technologist. We also spoke quite a great deal, and you talked about the threefold method to disruption. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and our audience getting inspired. So probably to you, I would ask you, what keeps you awake at night in this industry? In moving forward, what keeps you awake at night? What inspires you?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Lee, for pulling me here, Anisha. I know. The one thing is waking me up positively and negatively is the sustainability. I recently wrote Carbon Karma. How do we, help ourselves to become more sustainable? I more often become vegetarian for the fact that non-veg or meat is unsustainable. Stories of many, but sustainability keeps me and the good and good opportunities and great problems, another side. How do we tackle great problems? How do we capitalize the good opportunities through this emerging technologies, emerging sustainable options and opportunities to share and make our, I have another concept, Anisha, soil to soul journeys. Yeah, I mean, went crazy 2007 when I started my first startup in US. Then I have plenty to share, but I don't want to hijack the conversation. So sustainability and bracket Carbon Karma. Thank you.
That is totally something unexpected, but it's a very beautiful phrase. I saw Prakash, she was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, up next, Chalinda. I met Chalinda in my recent trip to Sri Lanka. He's a public figure there, one of the most celebrated public figures who, strongly advocates startups in the region, and really looking forward to learning from you. How did you blaze that trail? Take the first step forward in letting your fellow people dare to dream from home and telling that nothing is nothing is impossible, and despite the country's challenges. So before we dive into that, I know your academic portfolio is really goody-goody, but I want to ask you this thing. What is the most adventurous thing you've done in Singapore?
Probably a few years ago. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. I visit here at least once a quarter. I think maybe about a decade ago, I took a 30-hour flight here just to come and watch Iron Maiden. And I've been coming here for a lot of concerts, literally just flying in for the concert. And that was back then, 10 years younger. So it was a lot more scarier just being here, going for the concert and going back, catching a flight. So that was the thing that changed, I would say.
Nice. Adventurous. Well, last but not least, Prakash. So I guess my question to you would be that last year when we were here, we talked a lot about what we're doing in the Web3 space. This year it's a little bit different because now you're more placed in MENA. We've expanded to MENA. You represent that Web3 cohort that truly answered the call of now, let's go show the world how it's done. So, and you're half the time in MENA. We miss you a lot. So having said that, what do you miss most about Singapore whenever you're away from home?
It's got to be the food, man.
I know, right? The food, definitely. Nothing beats chicken rice back at home. So, okay, let's come to conversation proper. And I think I really want to quickly dive into, with you, Arjun. As I mentioned, I've been listening to a lot of your podcasts. And MENA has made headlines with big numbers, not in millions, but in billions. And you are in this a big vision on what the future holds, and MENA is taking the foot forward. So my question to you is, what's really happening? What's the reality? Because what's said in the news can be very different from what's happening in the reality. That dry powder you're talking about, what does it take to unlock it? So yeah, over to you.
Okay, well, thanks. So I should have said thank you for having me here. Firstly, I do not know why I belong to this panel, because I know 1% of what these gentlemen and this lady knows about the topic, but I'll try and sort of hold myself. So let me take a step back, if you don't mind, right? So I think the title of this talk is quite interesting, sustainability, and if I just wrap sustainability and just talk about climate or one aspect of sustainability in Web3, right? My biggest fear is shoehorning Web3 into sustainability, right? the problem of sustainability is far bigger than I think what Web3 alone can solve. I think it has a role to play, and I'll come to it. And I'll get to the Middle East context. So let's just look at climate, right? We've got COP28 coming around the corner. There was a very interesting report by the Rockefeller Institute, which came out about a year ago, where it said only about 16% of the required climate financing is available, right? So actually the gap is quite big, and actually what's really, really scary is that the gap is widening, right? Now, how do we solve for that gap? And I'll try and sort of leverage that into what the MENA is doing. So there's obviously government money, and most of what has gone into climate financing today is government money. Now, the challenge with government money is, I think, multifold today, right? We are increasingly living in a multipolar world, right? So national agendas are being driven by I guess, our foreign policies as nations. And why would people want to get into loss and damage compensation, into a common pool for possibly a nation that you don't enjoy a good relationship with, right? So that's a problem. Secondly, taxpayer money is becoming increasingly a political call in the West, right? In the so-called developed economies, we are a year away from the election in the US. The current prime minister of the UK at best is on a weak wicket, right? And these are the nations who are supposed to sort of contribute. So do you really see that happening? Thirdly, I think there is a massive issue, and this is where I think blockchain and Web3 can come into play a role. There are issues with traceability, right? There's issues with misappropriation of funds or misallocation of funds, right? So I think there are fundamentally a number of things which need to be resolved, right? And I'll now sort of wrap in the Middle East bit. So one is we've got to get around this notion that you can solve for climate financing one country at a time. That ain't going to happen. This is going to be taken at a national level or international level, and then it's going to be resolved. And I think it's part of that COP28. Secondly, I don't think you can even tackle climate on its own. I think it's very deeply entrenched in basically food and agro. It also is entrenched into water, right? And it's a topic that I think you need to take it universally. So I'm actually just making it into an impossible task. But then there's the final aspect, which is how do we unlock private capital, right? And private capital can come through funds, right? Which could be specialized funds or bonds or sukuks. And we are seeing more and more of those coming out in the Middle East. There is how do we drive high net worth income investments into it. The problem we have is that still the return on investments are not very clear on these sort of funds. The returns are long term. Again, there's a traceability issue, so on and so forth, which I think the Web3 can solve. And the third aspect is how do we get the retail investor excited? And to me, that is number one an education issue. Right, so most of us do not understand sustainability, most of us do not understand climate change, and most of us do not understand how eating meat, right, is actually causing an issue with sustainability, right, because we do not see the direct link. Coming down to the Middle East, and I'm sorry I've taken a lot more than I should. So you understand, right, we are a fossil fueled economy, right? We are the poster child for fossil fuel. Having said that, I think we should applaud where countries like Saudi, UAE, and Qatar are heading. They've all sort of have a strategy towards the net zero 2050, 2060. Some might say that should be earlier. I think with Egypt, we haven't seen one yet, but I think that's more to do with because Egypt is a developing nation, and I don't think till you clarify this whole lost and damages compensation issue, you will see some clarity coming out from it. We've seen a number of banks actually launch funds, launch bonds, right, which are getting subscribed at rates. I think there's more than nearly $3 trillion worth of funds which have come around. We have everything from PIF, which is the sovereign fund of Saudi Arabia, to ADIA, which sits in Abu Dhabi, which is investing in sustainable financing initiatives. So I think as a bloc, we are definitely moving quite rapidly, and arguably, actually, we're playing above our weight, right? Because I would want to point my fingers in a number of other countries and directions who should be taking a leading role, and not just an area which has 2 or 3 very rich countries. But if you really look at MENA, it's actually going through some of the worst geopolitical crisis it has in maybe decades, right? So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I don't want to go on because I can go on for 30 minutes
I
alone.
think you gave us like a master class on what's happening in MENA region, what is steering in there. So thank you so much. On that topic, maybe Prakash, you could extend on that topic because at Engine Starter Aya, we moved to the MENA region in flight for expansion and also to converge the region and also taking what we do best from this hub to that region. So probably you could share more of how did you identify that shift and how are you, share with us on the demand and supply shift and why that move and expansion.
Sure. So I guess, being based here and still being a Singapore headquartered company, regulation is still a big challenge for us. And what we saw in the UAE is actually for us to be nimble from a regulatory perspective. We've been working about 14 months now with a regulator who, is very interactive, facilitates a whole lot of discussions. And that for us allows us to actually, build, leveraging on that regulation, yet, being able to kind of connect all the different hotspots together. As a platform, we're looking specifically at projects from the Global South and building on what Arjun had set up. It's all around building this, filling up the gap that exists in climate finance and being able to leverage crowdfunding as well as eventually bringing in the retail investors. We see carbon as an up-and-coming asset class. In the early days, when it was fossil fuel, you saw great wealth like the Rockefellers being created because they participated in that value chain. And we're now going to see that big shift as countries move towards electric and decarbonization. And we feel carbon now has that ability for us to unlock this new level of economic layer, which we can actually help developing countries or even countries at the bottom to actually be able to protect nature-based solutions like their forests and their mangrove, and to really unlock this new level of finance that we're going to see that's going to fuel the global green finance. And where blockchain comes in is we bring in the traceability, we bring in the trust, which is still lacking in the space, and through that, there's this new prosperity that we can bring to the world. And why we're doing it in the UAE really is because, there are favorable regulations. Today, they're hosting COP at the end of this month. And we believe that it's not just going to be a single event, but it's going to be where a movement begins, where a whole lot of countries come together and feel that now is the time because we're running out of time and we are way behind, all that targets that we have set for ourselves. We're never going to achieve the 2030 goals that have been set, but this is where we come together as humanity to come together to solve a lot of these problems, and we feel the time is now.
Thank you so much. On that point of nimble regulations, being at VARA earlier last month, we liked the heart of the intent that regulations need not only be for the well-structured institutions, but it has to start from startups, so that you could have that perfect tango between innovation and consumer protection, even at a microfinancing level, and that's something truly to look out for. On that note, shifting the gear to Chalinda, where you represent this region where has so much of setbacks, and I think in terms of economic or physical policies, is just back-to-back setbacks. How did you do it? How did you, despite these setbacks, you lead the movement of how this region and the startups can stay viable and attractive, and how do you leverage across the region on other regulations that were more supportive?
Sure, thank you. I think Arjun mentioned that MENA is the poster child for the overall economy. I think Sri Lanka is the poster child for chaos for the last 40 years, I suppose. You know, I think across the time period, if you really look at it, talent has always been universal. It's opportunity that hasn't been universal. And what's really happened in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, especially, is that now opportunity is also universal. I don't need to be bound by the opportunities that are there in Sri Lanka or India or Bangladesh. You can really access across the region and if not across the globe. One of the things as an entrepreneur, built several companies, majority of which failed, but then had a couple of successful exits. I think you have to be, you're gonna make a fool out of yourself as an entrepreneur, irrespective of what you do, and you really need to be comfortable about that. You have to put yourself out there. You're gonna get criticized, you're gonna make mistakes, people are gonna ridicule you, but after a while you really get used to it, and then you know, it becomes noise, but then you kind of focus on what needs to get done, and you just focus on doing that. And that's what's really happened, and what we really looked at is there are certain challenges that we can't solve, but you don't have to solve it. You can leverage with other parties. So when we were setting up Enventures, that's what we are domiciled in Singapore, we are licensed under MAS, and that allowed us to invest our effort into identifying these entrepreneurs that are working in sustainability, that are working in crypto, Web3, finance, financial inclusion, and then just really leverage the rest of the ecosystems that are there. And that's what we've also done. We are not gonna wait till the governments or policymakers to really catch up, because that's not our game, right? We have 10-year window, 10 to 20 years that we look at, and then we just really focus on doing that. And now what's really happened is people are traveling. I think, Prakash spends half his time in Dubai, Arjun is there. You don't really have to be attached to your particular country to say, hey, you know what, I'm a Sri Lankan, I'm an Indian, or I'm a Singaporean. You can travel, and that's gonna happen. Whether it's pandemic or whether it's other type of political / economic crisis, people who want to do things, who are focused on impact, will get it done. And it's just about identifying that type of people and just kind of going ahead. It hasn't been easy, but it's fun.
That's what I really love about this panel. Everybody here, it's like we're not going for the regulators to iron out. We are going to move forward. In Tamil, we say, "Vanda pathukla." Let's see it when we get there. It's a very it's a very Indian thing, or it's an Asian thing. Let's get it done. Thank you so much. And Dr. Basu, I think talking about poster child, India has always led the wave in terms of financial innovation. When you come to SFF, we always talk about the UPI. So in terms of fintech framework, China and India has really aced the game. Now with fintech enablement in place, what's set out for the agri-tech, agri-fi space? Because you have majority of farmers there being underrepresented in India, in South Asia. So I know that your group of companies have done so much. Probably you could share with us probably on what are the opportunities there now that we've got fintech enablement in place and reaching to the micro masses. And what are you doubling down on?
Well, I'm going to a little bit stitch agri-tech with food and ecology in the context of what is happening, what should happen, given the large population of India, close to 50% still in rural, mainly dependent on agri and agri-associated opportunities. And that's pretty much the case scenario for emerging economies to underdeveloped economies. When I look at the tech transforming or giving opportunity to this underprivileged, the India has done a phenomenal through Aadhaar ecosystem of digitizing. You have livelihood stack, India stack. If you look at the way it has enabled, in last few years, 2016 to now, we have come up to a globally top number in terms of digital transactions. Now, if we could do that in a country like India, I think whole world would replicate. There is a saying, when I used to catch up in the US, if you prove in India, you can prove in the world, right? So India is a more complex in all dimensions. So having said now, they have come one step forward. One of our, I don't take the politician's name, but one of the prior prime ministers used to say, if government puts 1 rupee on the top, 15 paisas, meaning 15% reaches to the bottom, intended beneficiaries. Today, with Aadhaar ecosystem and digitization, you put 100 paisas or 1 rupee, it reaches 1 rupee. So that's a tech. I mean, so, and coming to that's a transparency and the traceability and the trust when exist. The people like Arjun and Chalinda believes, hey, we'll put more money here, right? And Prakash says, I can build more of this. And I can tell, I can impact, because I come from agri-food ecology, because, I have put some amount of, intense amount of energy in terms of how do we, I've initially in my early college days, Anisha, I fell in love with biotechnology. Let's change, genetically engineer everything, which is so cool and stuff, and all of that. That did not happen because of the regulation. Still in India, where GMOs are not permitted. So I've been keeping my fingers crossed. So that apart, but when we look at the agri contributes humongously to the carbon emissions, 35%. Greenhouse gas emissions and carbons. That's a incredibly, and we have an opportunity now, science now. You mentioned about what are the 4 or 5 disruptive things, and I wanted to dwell on that. See, agriculture, everybody takes it granted. That's actually the first industry or occupation for humankind. And pre-industrialization, 90+% of us were agri-based. Apparently still the case scenario for underdeveloped countries or poor countries. But here we are, industrialization, good, bad, ugly, we can debate some of the time. So what I'm trying to say is we have a golden opportunity now to address the big problems and to capitalize on the great opportunities. How do we do that? We need transparency and trust externalized. And the traceability put on the investors to consumers to regulators. This is only possible when we do a token systems on the web, 3 kind of stories. And we can tell, what matters to you? You have your pane of glass with your KPIs or, metric, and delivered every end of the day before you go to sleep, so you are happy soul. So this is what I've been, and I've been in agri-tech for close to 10 years now, but I did not open and see the opportunities, but our platform engaged 3 million active downloads and close to 1 million. We are building something called operating system for agri-food ecology with respect to how do we bring this good old grand traditional industry agri with the help of tech to sustainability, profitability, transparency. Because when you want to drink a coffee or eat some fruits, you should better know that it is not embedded with pesticides which you don't like, and how much we are polluting in the name of many, I don't want to dig in too much, but we are living in confused industrial era with more unsustainabilities than the sustainabilities. And here is a golden opportunity through the newer technologies. You call it as internet, ICT, IoT, big data, AI, ML. Put all this together for good and greater cause. Our farmers don't need to know that, but they need to know, the tools which help them use less fertilizers. I'm running precision agri projects. You reduce 70+% of water, achieve 100+% of productivity. So I'm going to stop because we are running out of time, it seems like. So
Yeah, I picked up my
there is an indication, okay, you know what? Some of the time, more detail. So
No, we've got
that's all
3
from my
minutes.
side.
We've got 3 minutes. No issue. I think. Thank you for that, and I think all our panelists, you shared a great deal about.
I
Yeah, go
missed your question on what is that 3-4 disruptors. Probably everybody knows it, but I'm repeating. One is when we look at the disruption should reach the bottom for inclusivity and sustainability, both in economic terms and ecological terms. And the partners for what they would like to achieve in this context, and the investors or the funders who would like to see both money and impact is achieved. So if there is anything, this is going to happen, this is going to start from agri-food ecology, where money has to be bought in, the delta has to be achieved in multiple dimensions, and the tech can deliver to all the stakeholders. I think I wanted to add that one sentence, Anisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's great wealth of knowledge whenever I hear you speak. So from that point of what we have done and how disruptive innovation really helps, I think I want to turn back a little bit to Chalinda, where I want to ask you, now, with all this that's happening, and you said that, Sri Lanka is the poster child for chaos. Now with cross-border, with borderless, tell us what more can the ecosystem do, or what more does the community expect the ecosystem to do for better accessibility to what the underrepresented society that you come from have? Or should I say, how else should we lower the barriers to level the playing field? What do you want to see for your portfolio companies, for your region?
Good question. I think it's slowly taking place. So we primarily invest in startups that are from tier 2, tier 3 cities in Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and so on. And one of the things that we are constantly pushing is for that awareness, because if you look at the marketing or the PR side of it, is primarily around the companies. It's all about unicorns. It's all about companies that raise, $50, $100 million. But if you really look at the bottom of the pyramid problems, these typically require or just to ignite, you need much less capital. So how do you bring some of these solutions out? And one of the things that we learned, because we've done, over the last 15 years, I've been involved in several companies, over 50 companies. One of the things that I noticed when I looked at the data is that when you work with tier 2, tier 3 cities, these entrepreneurs cannot afford to fake it till they make it, because their company is what is putting food on the table. So you have much more robust business models, and for them, it's they're solving their own personal problems within their communities. So you get to work with a lot of these entrepreneurs, and there's so much of technology that is involved, and the impact is much more greater. So I think from the regional standpoint, it's that connectivity that is doing. Venture capital is pretty much a status game, irrespective of where you are. But it's been reducing. It's about access, and I think now it's a lot more accessible. We are out of time, so I'm going to stop there.
I actually wanted just one more minute. Yeah, then I'll almost wrap. But I think maybe Prakash on a closing note, because at Aya, we're building that crowdfunding platform that actually interconnects this supply and demand, and also the region that are crying for inclusivity. Probably some closing notes, and also then we can have some closing notes from Arjun as well. So yeah.
Sure. So I feel, COVID kind of taught us one thing, right? That if we don't work together as one, the system will be failed. We believe at this point in time, the great wealth transfer is happening, and a lot of capital is actually going to be flowing to the south, the global south. And this is where the richer countries need to support the countries that actually need the most help. And through technology and through blockchain, we believe that this wealth transfer will be facilitated. And this is where a great amount of good can come out globally, right? And that's really what we're all working towards. And this is where we all need to come together as the ecosystem to kind of build this together, and that's primarily what we're focused on.
Thank you so much. Arjun, probably some closing notes.
So sure, I'll make it more practical, right? So here's my request to everybody who's left in the room and belongs in the Web3 community, right? So there's tremendous amount of talent which is flooding into the world of Web3, right? The issue with sometimes with talent is that, people tend to be highly opinionated and want to bring out the next shiny thing. My humble request to you guys is understand what you're trying to solve, understand the need of what sustainability is, see how it's interconnected into commerce and society, solve that problem, right? And, you know, I can bet you the tail is not going to wag the dog in this case. So that's my closing note.
Very beautifully put. Thank you once again to all our panelists. Thank you to the audience that's left here. We're definitely going to share all these sound bites on LinkedIn so that we could forward to the rest who are not here. And thank you for all your heartfelt sharing. And thank you once again to SUSS. May I welcome the panelists for a picture?